Okay, welcome back to the third in the video series, Stronger Recovery and Renewal Stories. In this video, we'll be looking at some of the insights into the stories and narratives emerging at the intersection of COVID-19 and the environmental crises facing us. Guy, over to you again.
Thanks, Ben. So again, we're asking ourselves this question: how do we use stories to make change happen? And that starts with, what stories are people already telling themselves about COVID-19? And we've been interested in tracking general public, but also corporation and governments. And today we're just going to have a look at one particular story related to the UK, but it's fascinating and really important to look at the stories that are being told around the world. So just a kind of reminder, this is the relationship between narratives and stories. And I think one of the interesting things is that we've already seen how much it's kind of moved on. So no one really talks about coronavirus anymore. It's about COVID-19. The big idea is listen to the experts and we'll get back to normal as quickly as possible. And all of those kind of stories have kind of shifted to support that narrative. The thing that we're just going to sort of discuss is a universal COVID-19 story. Now, because we're looking at this in terms of the opportunity for recovery and renewal, one of the things we're going to do is look at a story where the citizens are the hero. So for us, I know we're all sitting here feeling that clearly the heroes of the story as we're seeing it unfold are the NHS workers and all the kind of key workers that are keeping the communities going and together. But actually, we're talking about a journey of change and for recovery and renewal. And so for that, we need to look at the general population as a hero. We've been sort of sketching and kind of capturing lots of stories. We've got a big database of those with the sort of data points to go with them. And so for our citizens and communities, they are everyday and universal in the sense that they are being compliant on the whole and showing those sort of British values of resilience. But we know also there's vulnerability there. The frustrations, 99% are kind of getting by, but a kind of a building that the government has been slow to act, and this sort of reflects a kind of a sense that actually, how long have they or have they not been acting in the kind of best interests for our future and protecting our future. But the villain is still the virus itself, and the call to adventure and the threshold moment both together are beat it together with social isolation. The mentor and gifts, really interestingly, compared to where we were 6 months ago, and perhaps in the kind of context of how they've been viewed through the lens of climate breakdown, it's scientists and experts have been elevated into that area, particularly for those also in the next phase that we can kind of look towards. The allies for the communities, all the delivery workers, the supermarkets, the teachers that are keeping us going. The challenges, first and foremost, it's about protecting lives, it's about saving lives, and trying to safeguard jobs and incomes as a second challenge. And then it's about actually how do we kind of endure and then eventually exit the kind of lockdown. And what the better world looks like for most people at the moment is to get back to normal as quickly as possible with many lives saved. So from a storyteller's perspective, the interesting things here really, or possibly the most interesting thing, is the idea about let's get life back to normal as quickly as possible, because for the majority of us working in climate breakdown and biodiversity, that's not a better world for us.
So this slide introduces some epidemiology language that a few weeks ago none of us really would have heard of: the pre-surge, surge and post-surge curve of viral transmission. And really we're just making the point here that the stories related to COVID-19, as well as the universal COVID-19 story, will evolve over time as we move through the surge curve and the progression of the virus. And this slide, in this slide, we use the Three Horizons tool to explain a little about the power of stories in supporting a transition from declining business as usual status quo to a transformative or transformed new world. The red line indicating business as usual and a declining state of affairs, the green line indicating the rising new and different or better world, and the yellow line, Horizon 2, being the progression pathway for new and innovative ideas with the potential to either move us towards the transformed new future state or lock us back into a declining business as usual status quo.
So we also need to know, I guess, what we within the environmental movement are telling ourselves about COVID-19. And I think for us, the heroes are people that are working to fix or replace broken systems. The villain, it's very tempting to kind of look at, it's humanity's selfishness that has triggered yet another invisible killer. I think we're all feeling now is the time for transformation to a sustainable future. As Ben's just sort of talked about, actually, we are, a lot of us, talking about the elevated status of kind of science and experts, and thinking about how do we bring in kind of like thought leadership and I guess even kind of support from the corporations that have made the kind of biggest contribution in terms of innovating to improve our sort of health and safety. It's still about saving lives, but it's also about protecting the vulnerable. There's been sort of many stories and kind of new narratives emerging about who it impacts most. The fact that we need to inspire new thinking, make new connections, that we then need to start thinking about how do we mobilize action by showing that we've got real alternatives. And it's this idea about not returning to what we were before, but actually using this opportunity to create new systems for health of the planet and the health for us as communities living together. And I think, again, the things to kind of flag are potentially elements that we've used as cornerstones of our storytelling in the past. So if you think about Greta and the kind of biggest threat to humanity message, that is, not going to work anymore. Equally, ideas about sort of humanity's selfishness might be sort of difficult when we've all been cooperating together. However, there are aspects that clearly we can use and do want to use, and we'll start to kind of talk about those. So in summary, even just at this stage, what we'd kind of argue is that the environment COVID-19 story is not a better story. And in fact, there are thousands of better stories starting to pull in the opposite direction. We also kind of know that there are certain things we need to avoid talking about. Another one, for example, is the idea of sort of civil disobedience. How's that going to sit in a world where we've been obedient, and it's that civil obedience that's helped us kind of get through the worst crisis. And also we've got to be thinking now about how we ensure that the story is in the right place for us to build from as we exit. So we need to be thinking about what role is the environment seen to play in rebuilding lives right now. So the idea of sort of checking out for reflection and kind of social dreaming is important as we sort of imagine sort of different visions for the future. But we also need to be aware of how that sort of comes across, just in the same way as people have been very kind of smart to pick up on, now is not the time for gloating about drops in emissions, for example. But there are things that we can do, and we need to do now, because it is too late to influence recovery and renewal 6 months or a year from now, when it's the economic stimulus packages that are being formed today that will have some of the biggest impacts on the kind of changes that we want to make. So we need to be looking at the sort of tangible transformations, the things that are happening that we can build on, for example?
So again, this slide is really just indicating how we might think about an evolving story, building from the universal COVID-19 story, and then thinking about how we adapt the overarching environmental story to this to move us through pre-surge, surge, and post-surge stages of the virus. And again, back to the 3 Horizons tool, how some of the key messages identified in green in an earlier slide by Guy give us the potential to transition to this new transformed future state. That's it from us for video 3. In video 4, we're going to be proposing an overarching narrative for recovery and renewal that we think may be of interest to you. As always, as I've said always in these videos, the resources here available are free for you to use. The decks that we've used here are at the bottom of the webpage that you'll find these videos on. We only ask that you credit us on these. Thanks very much.